The night was moonless, and the air was thin, the kind of silence that presses on your chest before the storm breaks. The SEAL team moved through the Afghan valley like shadows, each man carrying 40 pounds of deer, and a weight heavier than that, the weight of uncertainty. Their mission was supposed to be simple: extract a high-value informant who held the key to dismantling a regional terror network. Intel said a small cell was operating nearby. Nothing suggested they were walking into a hornet's nest. Commander Blake Henderson, call sign Hawk, was at the front of the line. Broad-shouldered, steady-eyed, and every inch a soldier shaped by years of combat, he led his team with silent gestures. Behind him, Chief Petty Officer Ramirez scanned the darkness through his NVGs, whispering updates. Every man trusted Henderson without question. He was the kind of leader who didn't talk much, because he didn't have to. The valley ahead was narrow, lined with jagged cliffs. Wind carried sand and whispers. Henderson halted, raised his fist. Everyone froze. The sound was faint at first, metallic clicks echoing from the rocks above. His instincts screamed ambush before his brain could confirm it. Then hell exploded. Bullets tore through the night, tracer rounds streaking like burning comets. The first impact hit Miller, the team's comm specialist, in the vest, throwing him to the ground, but sparing his life. Henderson dove behind a boulder, barking orders. Contact front. 200 meters. Return fire. The team responded instantly. Bursts of M4 fire lighting up the shadows. But there were too many muzzle flashes coming from the cliffs. They were surrounded on 3 sides. The enemy had them boxed in like prey. Ramirez, call for extraction. Henderson shouted, firing controlled bursts. Comms are jammed, sir. Ramirez yelled back. Static screeched through his headset. The insurgents had cut their communications. Smart, deliberate, planned. God damn it. Henderson switched frequencies, but all he got was silence. He knew what that meant. They were on their own. The firefight intensified. Explosions shook the ground as RPGs slammed into nearby rocks, showering them with dust and shrapnel. The SEALs repositioned, using broken walls and craters for cover. Henderson crawled over to Doc Riley, who was patching up Miller's arm. He's stable, Riley said, his face pale but calm. How's our ammo? Half mags. Maybe less. Half mags. Surrounded by at least 50 fighters. Not good odds. Henderson peered through the smoke and saw movement, silhouettes rushing downhill in waves. The enemy was advancing fast. They're closing in. He called out. The SEALs fired in short bursts, dropping several attackers, but for every one that fell, 2 more took his place. Then came the sound that made every man's stomach drop, the click of empty chambers. Reloading. Someone yelled. Keep them back. Henderson roared, grabbing a fallen rifle and firing until it overheated. Minutes felt like hours. Dust filled their lungs, and sweat mixed with blood. The smell of gunpowder was everywhere. Still, the team held their line, refusing to fall. Henderson's mind raced. They needed a way out, some miracle. But every ridge, every escape route was covered by enemy guns. And the high ground? Impossible to reach under fire. He clenched his jaw. We dig in, he said quietly, mostly to himself. We hold until dawn. But dawn was 4 hours away. And every second, they were losing ground. The insurgents began to flank from the east. Petty Officer Lang threw a grenade, the explosion lighting up the mountainside, but more figures kept pouring out of the shadows. Henderson ducked as a round grazed his helmet. He fired back, hitting the shooter square in the chest. Ramirez crawled up beside him, breathless. Sir, they're calling in reinforcements. I picked it up on their frequency. How many? Dozens, maybe more. Henderson swore under his breath. He looked at his men, tired, bloodied, faces streaked with dirt, and knew what they were all thinking, but wouldn't say. This could be it. Then, a small flicker of movement caught his eye. The local informant they were supposed to extract was still huddled in the corner of the ruined compound, trembling. Henderson dragged him to cover. "You set us up?" he growled. The man shook his head violently. No, they knew you were coming. I swear." Henderson could see the terror in his eyes. Maybe he was telling the truth, maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter now. Overhead, the stars flickered faintly through the smoke. The sound of machine gun fire echoed off the cliffs like a heartbeat. Henderson keyed his dead radio again, out of habit, whispering into static. "This is SEAL Team 7. We are pinned down in Grid 9-4. Multiple hostiles. We need immediate support." Only static answered. He exhaled slowly. "All right," he said quietly. "We fight till we can't." The team tightened formation, every man watching a sector. Henderson's calm voice carried through the chaos. "No one dies here tonight. Not while I'm still breathing." But deep inside, even he felt the creeping weight of inevitability. Their ammo was running low. The enemy was regrouping. The valley had turned into a kill box, a death trap. Another explosion rocked the ground, throwing Lang off his feet. Henderson dragged him back, adrenaline surging. "You good?" "Still here," Lang gasped, grinning weakly through blood. "That's my guy," Henderson muttered, reloading. He fired again and again, until the rifle's barrel smoked. The team's cohesion, training, and sheer willpower kept them alive, but barely. When a lull finally came, silence filled the valley again. The insurgents were regrouping for another wave. Henderson leaned against the rock, catching his breath, sweat dripping from his chin. He looked up at the cliff line, the same one now dotted with the faintest glimmers of movement, and for the first time in years, he felt something cold settle in his chest. Helplessness. Ramirez crawled next to him, whispering, "Sir?" "It's been an honor." Henderson shot him a sharp look. "Don't you dare say that. I'm just saying, don't." He turned his gaze back to the ridge. The wind picked up, carrying sand and smoke through the night. Henderson squinted. For a split second, he thought he saw something, a glint of glass, maybe a lens, far off on the opposite ridge. Then it vanished. He blinked, dismissing it. Probably just a trick of the light. But miles away, through a high-powered scope, Captain Emma Cross adjusted her rifle's elevation and whispered into the dark. "Hold on, Commander. You're not alone." The SEALs didn't know it yet, but their salvation had already jumped into the storm. At forward operating base Dagger, the air smelled of oil, dust, and adrenaline, the scent of constant readiness. Captain Emma Cross sat alone in the weapons bay, cleaning the barrel of her rifle, her fingers moving with steady precision. The hum of generators outside mixed with distant chatter from the communications tent. She was used to the silence. Snipers lived in it, lived for it. Her rifle, a customized SR-47, a semi-auto long-range sniper, gleamed under the dim light. It wasn't regulation issue. Emma had built it herself, a hybrid between American precision and personal genius. Capable of single-shot accuracy or rapid-fire burst with almost no recoil, it was her masterpiece. Then, a sound cut through the routine, the faint, broken static of an emergency broadcast. "This is SEAL Team 7. Pinned down. Grid 9-4. Multiple hostiles." The voice was distorted but unmistakable. Emma froze. That voice, she knew it. Commander Blake Henderson. Her pulse quickened. Henderson had been her mentor years ago at Boode East training. the one who taught her to shoot through exhaustion, to steady her breathing, even as chaos screamed around her. He'd been more than a commander. He was the reason she became one of the best. She turned toward the comms tent, heart pounding. Inside, technicians scrambled over consoles, trying to clear the interference. A young operator named Staff Sergeant Dalton looked up as Emma stormed in. "What's going on?" she demanded. "SEAL Team 7's under fire, ma'am. Comms are jammed. Last signal was from a valley near Mazar. We're trying to raise them, but who's responding?" Dalton hesitated. "You, Command's still reviewing the situation. Air support's tied up. They said reinforcements in 40 minutes. 40 minutes? Emma snapped. "They won't last 10. Dalton looked uneasy. "Ma'am, you're not cleared for—" "Spare me the clearance," Emma interrupted. "Patch me into the mission board." Within seconds, the map appeared, a glowing digital grid with red enemy signatures surrounding a blinking blue cluster. SEAL Team 7 was boxed in, their perimeter collapsing. Emma stared at the screen, jaw clenched. Her mind began calculating distance, terrain, angles. A ridge to the north, 1,200 meters high, overlooked the entire valley. Perfect sniper position. She'd used it before, during reconnaissance months earlier. Her decision was instant. She turned on her heel and walked out. Dalton called after her. "Ma'am." "Orders?" She didn't answer. In the armory, she grabbed her pack. Extra mags, a thermal scope, smoke markers, and her rifle. She loaded each round with mechanical calm, the movements sharp, efficient, deliberate. Every soldier in the bay stopped what they were doing. Lieutenant Brooks, her immediate superior, appeared in the doorway. "Cross, what the hell are you doing?" "SEAL Team 7 is surrounded. No comms, no evac." "I can reach them." "You're not cleared for deployment." "I'm not asking for clearance." Brooks stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Emma, if you go out there alone, you'll be violating direct orders. You could face a court-martial." She met his eyes. "Then I'll deal with it when they're alive to testify." Brooks hesitated, torn between protocol and respect. He knew her record. He knew that look in her eyes meant nothing would stop her. Finally, he sighed. "You didn't get this from me." He tossed her a small encrypted GPS. "It'll get you close." Emma nodded once. "Thank you, sir." Minutes later, she was in the air. The Black Hawk thundered through the dark, slicing above the mountain ridges. Inside, the co-pilot shouted over the headset, "We can't land anywhere near that grid. Enemy fire's too hot." "I don't need you to land," Emma replied. "Just get me within jump range." The pilot glanced at her in disbelief. "You're going solo?" She chambered around, eyes fixed ahead. "Always have." The helicopter climbed higher, the valley below flickering with distant explosions. The radio crackled with intercepted transmissions, foreign voices shouting orders, the dull thump of mortar. Henderson's team was still holding on. Barely. Emma closed her eyes, steadying her breathing. Henderson's words echoed in her head, from years ago on the sniper range. "You don't shoot with your hands. You shoot with your heartbeat. Calm your heart, and you'll own the world." When the pilot shouted, "We're at range," she didn't hesitate. She stepped into the cold, roaring wind and jumped. For a few seconds, she was weightless, falling through darkness. The world below was a sea of shadows and fire. She pulled her chute, the canopy opening silently above her. She angled toward a ridge, landing hard but clean on the rocky slope. Silence, just wind and her own breath. She detached the chute, slung her rifle across her back, and began moving. Her boots pressed against loose gravel, each step calculated. Her NVGs painted the world in shades of green, burnt vehicles, shattered walls, flickering fires. She saw the flashes of gunfire in the distance, the SEAL's position. Her instincts kicked in. She crouched low, scanning the terrain. Enemy patrols roamed the foothills, laughing, careless. She waited until two came close enough, then slipped behind a boulder. When they passed, she moved like a phantom, knife glinting once, then silence. No one ever saw her coming. As she climbed, the radio on her shoulder buzzed faintly. The encryption cracked halfway. Henderson's voice came through, faint but alive. Low on ammo. 2 down, no air support. She pressed the mic. "Henderson, this is Cross. Hold your position." Static. Then a pause. "Cross? Emma Cross?" "Yes, sir." "What the hell are you doing here?" "Saving your ass." He laughed softly, a rare, tired sound. "Still disobeying orders, huh? Learned from the best." The radio hissed again, then went silent, the connection lost. But it was enough. They both knew she was coming. She reached the top of the ridge as dawn began to stir faint light over the mountains. The wind whipped her hair as she set up the rifle, locking it into its bipod. Through her thermal scope, she could see everything. The SEALs hunkered behind a ruined wall, muzzle flashes all around them, enemy fighters circling like wolves. She adjusted her range minus 1,450 meters. Long distance, but she'd hit farther. Her finger hovered over the trigger. She centered her crosshairs on a sniper crawling up the east cliff. Breath steady. Heart calm. Crack. The man dropped instantly. Then another. And another. Each shot precise, controlled, unstoppable. Through the haze, one of the SEALs looked up toward her ridge, eyes wide. The bullets raining down from above weren't enemy fire. They were salvation. Below, Henderson ducked behind cover, hearing the clean rhythm of long-range shots cutting through the chaos. He smiled, muttering under his breath, "That's my girl." Emma reloaded calmly, eyes sharp. Her rifle's barrel steamed faintly in the cold. She adjusted her position, shifting angles as mortar boomed nearby. One woman. One rifle. 50 lives on the line. The battle for the valley had just changed. The mountains were alive with fire. Captain Emma Cross crawled along the razor edge of the ridge, her rifle cradled tight to her chest. Below her, the valley boiled with chaos. Flashes of gunfire, explosions, and distant screams echoing between the cliffs. It was a war zone painted in blood and smoke. Through her scope, she could see Commander Henderson's team, pinned inside the ruins of an old mud-brick village. 8 men, surrounded by more than 50 insurgents. The odds were impossible, but so was she. Emma steadied her breathing, aligning her scope with the rooftop sniper who was zeroing in on Henderson's position. She exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. Crack. The man fell backward, lifeless. The sound echoed through the valley like a whisper of vengeance. Her next shot dropped another gunman charging down the slope. Then another. Her movements were precise, mechanical, a rhythm of death and mercy. For every bullet she sent, a life was saved below. Down in the chaos, Henderson noticed it first. Someone's picking them off. He yelled, ducking behind cover as another insurgent went down. Chief Ramirez peeked over the wall, wide-eyed. Where the hell did that come from? Doesn't matter, Henderson said, grinning despite the dust and blood. Keep firing. Whoever it is, they're on our side. Up on the ridge, Emma adjusted her position, sliding across the rough stone to a better angle. Each movement was deliberate, slow enough to stay hidden, fast enough to keep the rhythm of her assault. Her modified sniper rifle hummed faintly with heat, the barrel shimmering under the cold mountain wind. She pressed her radio again. SEAL Team 7, this is Cross. I've got overwatch. East side clear. Move west and regroup. Static hissed. Then Henderson's voice came through, ragged but alive. Cross, that you? Affirmative. You picked a hell of a night to break orders. You picked a hell of a night to need saving, she shot back, smirking despite the danger. Even through the broken signal, she could hear the relief in his voice. Good to have you with us, Captain. Good to be here, sir. Now move. As she provided covering fire, her mind was locked in calculation. Distance, wind speed, elevation, she read them like a second language. The rifle was an extension of her heartbeat. But beneath the precision, something deeper drove her. The memory of men she'd trained with, men she'd lost. She wasn't just fighting for them now. She was fighting to make sure Henderson's team didn't join their ghosts. She shifted again, pulling her night vision goggles down. Through the glowing green lens, she spotted a group of insurgents circling wide, moving to flank the SEAL's left side. If they got into position, it would be over. Emma whispered to herself, "Not today." She lined up the lead attacker, adjusted 2 clicks for wind, and fired. Crack. The bullet struck true. The man dropped silently. The others froze, confused, before diving for cover. Emma took them one by one. 4 shots, 4 kills. It was surgical, cold, flawless, but her victory didn't go unnoticed. A mortar shell exploded just meters from her position, showering her with dust and gravel. She ducked, rolling behind a boulder as debris rained down. The enemy had spotted her muzzle flash. She spat blood, checked her weapon, and whispered, "All right. Now you know where I am." Another explosion hit closer. The mountain trembled under her boots. Emma's breathing quickened, but her hands stayed steady. Years of training had burned one truth into her: panic is death. She took a deep breath, reloaded, and peeked over the ridge. Through the haze, she saw 3 insurgents climbing toward her position, fast, armed with AKs and knives. Emma switched to semi-auto mode. The rifle clicked into place, and she waited, silent, patient. When the first head appeared over the ridge, she fired twice. The body slumped. The others hesitated, then charged. Big mistake. Emma pivoted, firing 3 precise shots. Both fell before they ever reached her. She exhaled, heart pounding against her ribs. The world narrowed to the sound of her breathing and the faint echo of gunfire below. She wasn't safe, but she was alive. Meanwhile, down in the valley, Henderson used the distraction to move. "Go! Go!" he ordered. His team dashed from the collapsing wall to a nearby ravine, dragging the wounded with them. Henderson covered the rear, firing short bursts as bullets kicked up dirt at his feet. When they reached the ravine, he crouched and checked his men. 2 injured, 1 unconscious, all still breathing. He looked up toward the ridge, where flashes of light still flickered. 1 rifle, firing faster and cleaner than any he'd ever seen. Ramirez followed his gaze. "That's her, isn't it?" "Yeah," Henderson said softly. "That's Cross, the sniper you trained?" "The best I ever saw," he replied. "And the most stubborn?" He smiled grimly. "We're still in this fight because of her." Back on the ridge, Emma knew she couldn't stay static. The insurgents would keep adjusting their fire toward her. She grabbed her pack, crawled 30 meters west, and set up a new position behind a cracked stone outcrop. Her left arm ached from the recoil, but she ignored it. She checked her scope again. The SEALs had reached the ravine, met her cover, but still trapped. Enemies were converging fast from the north slope. She switched frequencies. "Henderson, they're coming from your 12 o'clock. 15 hostiles. You've got 2 minutes." He responded immediately. "Copy that." "You got eyes on their lead?" "Always." Her crosshairs found the lead fighter waving his men forward. One shot center mass. He dropped. The others scattered. Emma fired 3 more times, each bullet striking before the echoes faded. Then she noticed something. A figure with an RPG stepping from behind a burned truck, aiming straight at the SEAL's ravine. Her heart skipped. Not today. She adjusted quickly, accounting for the RPG's arcing trajectory. One squeeze of the trigger. Crack. The round struck the weapon's chamber just as it fired. The explosion lit up the valley like lightning, consuming the gunner and sending the others diving for cover. The SEALs below erupted with shouts of relief. That was her. Ramirez yelled. Henderson grinned. Yeah, it damn sure was. But Emma wasn't celebrating. She could feel the weight of every shot, the cost of every life taken. She paused to breathe, to remind herself why she was there. Saving lives meant ending others. It was a truth she'd accepted long ago, but it never felt easy. As she scanned the horizon again, she caught sight of movement. 2 technical trucks rolling toward the valley, mounted with machine guns, reinforcements. Her stomach sank. Henderson, she said into the radio, you've got vehicles inbound. 2 trucks. 50 cal turrets. How long? 2 minutes. He cursed. We don't have the firepower to stop those. Leave that to me. Emma quickly assembled her anti-material attachment, a heavy-duty round designed for long-range armor penetration. It was risky at this distance, but she had no choice. She took aim at the lead truck, inhaled slowly, and fired. The bullet pierced the truck's radiator, sending steam and smoke billowing out. The driver swerved, straight into a boulder. The turret gunner tried to recover, but Emma's second shot took him out instantly. The second truck stopped, its men hesitating. Emma didn't give them time to think. She fired again, shattering the windshield. The vehicle veered, crashed, and exploded into flames. Below, the SEALs erupted in cheers. Holy hell, Ramirez shouted. She just took out 2 trucks. Henderson's grin was sharp. That's Captain Cross for you. For the first time in hours, the gunfire began to fade. The insurgents were falling back, disoriented, broken. But Emma knew it wasn't over. She'd made herself the target now, and when they regrouped, they'd come for her with everything they had. She stayed low, reloading her last magazine, eyes fixed on the smoke-filled horizon. The sun was rising, painting the sky orange and gold. It was going to be a long day. But she'd already made up her mind. If this valley was going to be anyone's grave, it wouldn't be theirs. The first light of dawn crept over the Afghan mountains, washing the valley in a pale, haunting glow. Smoke still curled from burning vehicles, and the echo of gunfire lingered in the cold morning air. For a fleeting moment, silence held, the fragile kind that comes just before another storm. Captain Emma Cross adjusted her scope, scanning the terrain. The insurgents had fallen back temporarily, but she could see movement among the rocks and ridges. They were regrouping. Reinforcements were coming. She could almost feel it, that electric hum before chaos. Her earpiece crackled. "Cross, this is Henderson," came the tired but steady voice. "Status?" She replied, "I've got visual on at least 30 hostiles forming up 2 clicks north. They're planning a counterstrike." "Damn it," Henderson muttered. "We're low on ammo. 2 men wounded, 1 critical. Evac bird still 40 minutes out." Emma paused. "Then we hold for 40 minutes. There was a short silence before Henderson said, "Roger that. But Cross, don't do anything reckless." She smirked. "No promises, Commander." She pulled a fresh magazine from her pouch, her fingers trembling just slightly, not from fear, but exhaustion. She'd been firing and crawling across sharp rock for nearly 7 hours. Her uniform was torn, her knees bleeding. Still, her focus never wavered. Emma checked her rifle. The barrel was scorched, the bolt hot to the touch. She whispered under her breath, "You and me, girl. Just a little longer." It was something she always said to her weapon, the same one she'd carried through over a dozen missions. The only companion that had never let her down. Down in the ravine, Commander Henderson was patching up Chief Ramirez, who had taken shrapnel to his shoulder. The rest of the SEALs were setting defensive positions, gathering whatever ammo and grenades they had left. "Cross says we've got company coming," Henderson told his team. "So here's the deal. We're not dying here. We hold this ravine until evac arrives, no matter what." His men nodded grimly. They'd seen death too many times to fear it. But there was something about knowing Cross was still up there. One sniper, alone on that ridge, that gave them an edge of hope. "She's buying us time," Ramirez muttered. "We better make it count." The wind shifted. Emma could smell dust and diesel, vehicles approaching. Through her scope, she spotted 3 technicals kicking up trails of dirt, racing through the valley floor. Behind them, at least 40-foot soldiers were advancing on foot, their weapons glinting in the morning sun. She radioed down. "Multiple vehicles inbound. North Ridge. You've got maybe 10 minutes. Can you stop them?" Henderson asked. "Not all," she said truthfully, "but I can slow them down." She took a deep breath and aimed for the first truck's engine. One perfect shot. The bullet slammed through the hood. The vehicle jerked, rolled, and exploded. The second swerved to avoid it, flipping over. Dust filled the air. The third truck powered through. Gunner sprang blindly toward the ridge. Emma ducked, feeling bullets chew into the rock beside her head. Pebbles sliced her cheek, leaving a thin line of blood. She didn't even flinch. "Too close," she whispered, reloading. She popped back up, aimed through the haze, and took the gunner out with one clean headshot. But now the enemy knew exactly where she was. Within seconds, the ridge lit up with return fire. Hundreds of rounds tore into the rocks, sending chips of stone flying. Emma hugged the ground, her rifle pressed tight against her chest. She could hear the hiss of bullets passing inches above her skull. She rolled behind a larger boulder, her mind racing. "They're trying to pin me," she muttered. She grabbed a smoke grenade from her vest and hurled it downslope. Thick gray clouds erupted, giving her a moment of cover. She moved, crawling low, fast, sliding across gravel to a new firing position 50 meters east. Her lungs burned, her muscles screamed, but she didn't stop. When the smoke cleared, she was already lined up again, and waiting. One insurgent stood exposed, scanning the ridge for her. She fired. He dropped. Then another. Then another. Her bullets sang through the wind, deliberate, rhythmic, merciless. Below, Henderson's team held their line. "They're pushing harder," Ramirez shouted. "Let em," Henderson growled. "Cross is thinning the herd." He wasn't wrong. Every time the insurgents tried to advance, her rifle tore holes in their ranks. The battlefield was turning into a graveyard of failed assaults. But for every man she killed, 2 more seemed to appear. Minutes dragged like hours. The SEALs were running low on ammunition. Henderson looked around, counting their last magazines. "We've got 10 minutes left of firepower," he muttered. Ramirez glanced up at the ridge, where faint muzzle flashes flickered. "She can't keep that up forever." "I know," Henderson said quietly. "But if anyone can, it's her." On the ridge, Emma's situation was deteriorating fast. Her rifle jammed after a burst of heat. She cursed under her breath, slamming the bolt back, clearing the chamber. Her hands were bleeding now. Small cuts, burns, dirt ground into her skin. But she kept fighting. There was no room for weakness. She switched to her sidearm as a group of insurgents started climbing the slope toward her position. They'd figured it out. The sniper wasn't invincible. If they could get close, they could end her. Emma backed up slowly, firing precise shots down the incline. The first climber went down, then another. But they kept coming, shouting, firing, relentless. She grabbed her last grenade, pulled the pin with her teeth, and lobbed it downhill. It exploded mid-slope, sending shockwaves through the ground. Rocks and smoke filled the air, scattering the attackers. For a brief second, the mountain was silent again, just the ringing in her ears. She slumped against a boulder, chest heaving, eyes scanning the horizon. She could see the SEALs below still holding strong. They were depending on her, and that thought alone kept her on her feet. She reloaded what was left. 5 bullets. That was it. Down in the ravine, the situation worsened. Henderson's men were running dry. "We're out of grenades," one shouted. "Then use what's left and aim true," Henderson ordered. But even he knew they couldn't last much longer. Then, over the radio, Emma's voice crackled through. "Henderson, I'm low on ammo." "How low?" 5 rounds. A pause. "Then make every one count, Captain." She smiled faintly. "Always do." Through her scope, she saw the final wave forming, the insurgents gathering for one last assault. Dozens of them, fueled by fury and desperation. They were coming fast, spreading across the valley like a swarm. Emma steadied her breath. The world around her seemed to fade. No sound, no wind, no fear. Just her heartbeat and the crosshairs. First shot, a leader went down. Second, a heavy gunner. Third, a man carrying explosives. Each trigger pull was pure instinct. The fourth shot struck the driver of a jeep, sending it flipping into the air. And the fifth, her last, took out a man raising his rifle toward Henderson. Click. Empty. She exhaled, lowering her weapon. Her job was done. Down below, Henderson's team used that moment to charge forward, their last stand. They pushed hard, close-range combat, blades and bullets colliding in a storm of dust and fire. Emma watched helplessly, unable to fire but unwilling to look away. Then finally she heard it. The deep thump-thump of rotor blades. "Evacs here," Ramirez shouted. The rescue helicopter roared over the ridge, its machine guns blazing, cutting through the last wave of insurgents. The valley filled with deafening noise, dirt whipping into the air. Henderson signaled his men and began the retreat toward the chopper. But Emma didn't move. Her position was too far. She couldn't make it down in time, not without cover. She stayed on the ridge, firing a captured AK until it clicked empty again. The helicopter's door gunner spotted her, covering her descent as she sprinted down the slope, slipping on rocks, dodging bullets. Henderson extended a hand from the ramp. "Come on, Cross, move." She leapt the final few feet, landing hard inside the chopper as it lifted off. The SEALs pulled her in, slamming the hatch shut. Below, the valley burned in a haze of smoke and silence. As the helicopter rose into the dawn, Emma slumped against the wall, chest heaving. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood, but her eyes were alive, fierce and unbroken. Henderson sat across from her, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're insane," he said, half smiling. She smirked back. "Took you long enough to notice." The men around them laughed, exhausted but grateful. For the first time in hours, they felt safe. Outside, the valley grew smaller and smaller, a scar on the earth, a reminder of what they'd survived. And as the helicopter disappeared into the horizon, one thing was certain: the war wasn't over yet. But for now, they had won. The helicopter's rotor slowed to a dull whine as it settled on the landing pad at Bagram Air Base. The early morning sun glared across the tarmac, turning the metal fuselage gold. Dust swirled in lazy circles around the landing zone. Inside the chopper, Captain Emma Cross sat motionless. Her body was present, but her mind was still trapped in the valley, still hearing the gunfire, still tasting the grit in her mouth, still seeing faces in the smoke. The side door clanked open and medics rushed forward. They pulled the wounded from the helicopter, shouting for stretchers and saline. Emma barely noticed. Her eyes were locked on Commander Henderson, who stood just ahead, helping the last of his men off the bird. "Captain, you're clear to debrief," one of the base officers said, placing a hand on her shoulder. She nodded, but didn't move. Her muscles felt like stone. The officer frowned. "Ma'am, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she replied quietly. The same automatic answer soldiers gave when they were anything but fine. Inside the operations tent, the mood was somber but electric. Word of the mission had already spread through the base. The SEALs who'd been ambushed in the mountains, the mysterious sniper who turned the tide alone. Soldiers were whispering stories, exaggerating details, turning the night's chaos into legend before the blood had even dried. Henderson entered first, followed by Cross. Both were bruised, dirty, and exhausted beyond reason. Colonel Maddox, their commanding officer, stood waiting behind a folding table covered in maps and reports. "At ease," Maddox said, though his tone carried little warmth. His sharp eyes flicked between them. "I've read your after-action notes. Sounds like a hell of a night." "More like a hell we barely walked out of," Henderson replied, lowering himself into a chair with a grunt. Maddox looked at Cross. "Captain Cross, your presence in that valley was unauthorized. You were assigned to overwatch 20 miles east. Why did you break command protocol?" Emma met his gaze evenly. "Because your orders would have gotten 8 men killed, sir." The tent went silent. Even Henderson glanced sideways at her. Maddox's jaw tightened. "You're aware that's insubordination," he said slowly. "Yes, sir. I'm also aware that it saved your SEAL team." Maddox exhaled through his nose, a quiet, frustrated sound. "You think heroics make you untouchable, Captain?" "No, sir," Emma said, her voice steady. "I think results speak louder than orders." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Henderson leaned forward. "Colonel, with respect, she's the reason we're sitting here right now. We were outnumbered 10 to 1. She picked off half the hostiles herself. If she hadn't ignored protocol, we'd be body bags right now." Maddox studied the two of them in silence. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Understood. You'll both have formal reports filed. But for now," he straightened, "you've got 48 hours downtime. Debrief complete." Henderson nodded. "Thank you, sir." Emma gave a curt salute, turned, and walked out into the sunlight. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. She blinked against the brightness, her eyes adjusting. Around her, the base bustled with normal life. Mechanics working on Humvees, soldiers jogging past, radios buzzing. Ordinary chaos. But after the night she'd lived through, it all felt distant, unreal. She made her way to the barracks, her boots heavy on the gravel. When she reached her quarters, she closed the door softly behind her and leaned against it. The silence hit her like a wave. For the first time in hours, maybe days, she let herself breathe. She unstrapped her rifle, laid it gently on the table, and stared at it. The weapon was scorched, its barrel blackened from overuse. She brushed her fingers along the cold metal, whispering, "You did good." Then, after a moment, softer, "We did good." But even as she said it, a part of her heart clenched. Because for every soldier she'd saved, she'd taken lives, dozens of them. Some faces she'd seen clearly through her scope. She'd memorized the look in their eyes right before the bullet hit. That's the curse of a sniper. You don't just kill. You see them. A knock broke the silence. "Doors open," Emma said. Commander Henderson stepped in, still in his dusty gear, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you could use this." She managed a faint smile. "You always know the right kind of medicine." He handed her the cup and sat across from her. "You were unbelievable out there, Cross." "Unbelievable or reckless?" she asked, taking a sip. He smirked. "Both. But that's what makes you, you." She chuckled, then stared into the coffee, the steam swirling like smoke. "You know, Henderson, when I saw your team pinned down, I thought I was too late." "You weren't," he said quietly. "You showed up when it mattered most." "Maybe," she whispered. "But I keep thinking about the ones who didn't walk out. The men we couldn't save." Henderson nodded slowly. "You can't carry every ghost, Emma." She looked up at him, eyes hard but tired. "Then who will?" They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that said everything words couldn't. Henderson finally stood, finishing his coffee. "You're a damn fine soldier," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She smiled faintly. "Even Colonel Maddox?" "Especially him." He started toward the door, then turned back. "Get some rest. You've earned it. And Cross, if Command tries to make this political, I'll back you. Every step." "Appreciate it," she said softly. When he left, the room felt emptier than before. Emma sat on her bunk, staring at the scarred table. The air was still thick with memories. The mountains, the screaming, the ringing of metal. She reached for the small dog tag she wore beneath her shirt, not hers, but a fallen teammate's. She rubbed her thumb over the engraved name, whispering a silent promise. "I'll keep fighting for you." Later that evening, Emma stood outside near the runway. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the desert. Helicopters lifted off in the distance, their silhouettes black against the orange sky. She closed her eyes, listening to the sound of the rotors fading, the same sound that had pulled her out of hell that morning. Ramirez limped up beside her, his shoulder bandaged. "Heard you chewed out the colonel," he said with a grin. "I didn't chew him out," she replied. "I just told him the truth. That's as good as a chew-out in this place." He laughed, then turned serious. "We owe you one, Cross? All of us?" "You don't owe me anything," she said. "You did your job." "I did mine." He shook his head. "Nah, you did more. You saved us when no one else could." She looked back toward the fading sun. "Let's just say I had a good angle." Ramirez smiled and walked off, leaving her alone again, alone with the wind and the memory of mountains. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the valley again. The fire, the faces, the endless sound of gunfire. She woke up twice in a cold sweat, heart pounding. By dawn, she gave up trying to rest. She sat outside on a crate, watching the sun rise over the distant peaks. The war felt both far away and right in front of her, like a ghost that never stopped whispering. As the base stirred to life, a new day began. She knew Command would come calling soon. Questions, paperwork, politics. But she didn't care. Her purpose wasn't written in reports or medals. It was written in survival. In every man she'd pulled back from the edge. In every bullet that had meant one more heartbeat for someone else. She wasn't a hero. She didn't believe in that word. She was a soldier. And soldiers endure. 2 days after the firefight, Captain Emma Cross sat in a small interrogation room inside the base's administrative compound. The air was stale. A single overhead light cast a sharp cone over the table. illuminating a folder stamped Classified Operation Iron Valley. Across from her sat Major Dalton, a man with steel-gray hair and eyes that had forgotten softness. He flipped through her file, slowly, deliberately, the kind of rhythm meant to make a soldier sweat. Emma didn't. She just watched him, calm and composed, though the sleepless circles under her eyes betrayed how hard she'd fought to keep it that way. Finally, Dalton looked up. "Captain Cross, you understand why you're here?" "Yes, sir," she said. "Because I disobeyed orders." "Good," he replied flatly. "Then we agree on the facts." He pushed a sheet of paper across the table. Her mission report. "According to this, you abandoned your assigned Overwatch position and engaged independently in a combat zone. That's a serious breach of command." Emma met his gaze, unwavering. It was the only way to save the SEAL team. Dalton's expression didn't change. "You weren't ordered to save them." "I wasn't ordered to let them die, either," she countered. He stared at her for a long moment, then leaned back in his chair. "You think you did the right thing?" "I know I did." Dalton sighed, rubbing his temple. "You're a sniper, Captain. Your job is to follow command, not rewrite it." Emma leaned forward, voice low but firm. "My job is to complete the mission. And the mission was to bring our men home alive. I did that." The Major's jaw twitched. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick, heavy, defiant. Then he closed the file. "You're being reassigned." The words hit her harder than she expected. "Reassigned?" She repeated. "To where?" Dalton didn't look up. "That's classified for now. You'll be briefed in 48 hours. Until then, you're confined to base." Emma clenched her fists under the table. "Sir, with respect, I've been in the field nonstop for 6 months. You're grounding me for saving lives? Consider it a cooling-off period," he said, his tone almost dismissive. "You've made enemies, Captain. Some people think you're reckless." She gave a bitter laugh. "And some think I'm still alive because I wasn't." Dalton ignored the comment. "That'll be all, Captain." Dismissed. Outside, the air felt colder than usual. The desert wind tugged at her sleeves as she walked out of the compound. Soldiers passed her on their way to chow, saluting, nodding. The looks in their eyes said everything. Word had spread about her interrogation. Some saw her as a hero, others as a liability. She wasn't sure which one she hated more. As she walked toward the range, she spotted Commander Henderson waiting by a Humvee. He was leaning against it casually, arms crossed, a faint smirk on his face. "Let me guess," he said. "They gave you the Dalton special." She stopped beside him. "He wants me off the field." "Figures," Henderson said, shaking his head. "You make one call that saves a dozen lives, and suddenly you're dangerous." "He said I'm being reassigned," she replied. Henderson raised an eyebrow. "Reassigned? To what?" He wouldn't say. "Just that it's classified." He looked thoughtful. "That usually means black ops. Or a punishment detail." Emma smirked. "Knowing my luck, probably both." He chuckled, then grew serious. "For what it's worth, Cross, you did the right thing. I don't care what the suits say." "Maybe," she said softly, "but right doesn't always win wars." Later that evening, Emma went to the shooting range, her sanctuary. The sound of gunfire had always been her language, her rhythm. She set up a single target at 1,000 meters, adjusted her scope, and lay prone. Breathe in, focus, exhale, fire. The shot cut through the air like a whisper. The round punched the target dead center. She reloaded automatically and fired again. And again. Each bullet was an answer to a question only she could hear. As the last casing hit the dirt, she let the rifle rest beside her and rolled onto her back, staring up at the sky. The stars were cold and indifferent. She wondered how many other soldiers had laid here before her, trying to make sense of orders and morality, trying to reconcile the chaos of war with the rules written by men who'd never heard a bullet pass their ear. The next morning, she was summoned to the command tent. When she entered, Colonel Maddox was there, along with Major Dalton and a third man she didn't recognize. He wore civilian clothes, but had the unmistakable aura of authority. "Captain Cross," Maddox began, "this is Director Paul Keaton, Special Operations Command." Keaton extended a hand. "Captain, I've heard about your work. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it." Emma shook his hand cautiously. "Thank you, sir. To what do I owe the meeting?" Keaton smiled faintly, as if he'd been waiting for that question. "We're putting together a specialized unit. Off-book, deniable operations only. We need soldiers who don't just follow orders, but know when to break them." Emma's eyes narrowed. "You mean the kind of soldier Dalton here, just disciplined?" Dalton shifted uncomfortably. Keaton smirked. "Precisely." Maddox crossed his arms. "This isn't a typical reassignment, Cross. It's dangerous. High risk, high secrecy. But if you're in, it'll clear your record." Emma studied them for a long moment. "And if I say no?" Keaton's tone hardened. "Then you'll be benched indefinitely. No missions. No fieldwork. You'll fade out behind a desk." For Emma, that wasn't even an option. "When do I leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow," Keaton said. 0600. You'll be briefed en route. That night, as she packed her gear, Henderson stopped by her barracks. "So it's true," he said. "They're sending you off the books." "Looks that way," she said, zipping her bag shut. He watched her quietly. "You sure about this?" Emma nodded. "If I don't go, I'm done. And if I do, maybe I'll actually make a difference." Henderson sighed. "You already made a difference." She smiled faintly. "Not enough." He stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're chasing ghosts, Cross. You can't save everyone." "Maybe not," she said softly, "but I can damn sure try." He let his hand drop. "Then promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Don't die trying." Morning came too soon. A transport plane waited on the runway, its engines roaring against the dawn. Emma climbed the ramp without hesitation. Inside, several other soldiers were already seated, none she recognized. Their eyes told the same story: experienced, tired, and too dangerous to fit neatly into the chain of command. Keaton stood near the cockpit. "Welcome to Task Force Echo, Captain. From this point forward, you answer to me, and only me." Emma nodded, strapping in. "What's the mission?" "You'll find out soon enough," Keaton said. "But here's what I can tell you. It's not a rescue this time. It's a hunt." She raised an eyebrow. "For who?" His gaze was cold and sharp. "For the people who armed the insurgents that tried to kill you." Emma's stomach tightened. "You mean we're going after the suppliers?" "Not just them," Keaton said. "The ones above them. The financiers. The ones who make war profitable." He paused, watching her reaction. "You've seen what their money does on the ground. Now we're taking the fight to their doorstep." Emma sat back, eyes fixed ahead. For the first time in days, a flicker of purpose lit inside her. "I'm in," she said simply. As the plane lifted off, the base grew smaller below, fading into dust and memory. Henderson stood near the runway, watching until the aircraft disappeared into the clouds. Inside, Emma closed her eyes and exhaled slowly. The engines hummed, steady and relentless. Ahead of her was another mission, darker, deeper, and far more dangerous than the last. But that was fine. She wasn't done fighting. Not yet. The hum of the transport plane vibrated through Emma Cross's bones. She sat strapped into her seat, staring out the small oval window at the mountains below. Every shadow, every ridge reminded her of the valley, the chaos, the gunfire, the ghosts she'd carried home. But this time, she wasn't alone. Around her, Task Force Echo was preparing silently. Soldiers checked weapons, adjusted gear, and reviewed digital maps, glowing softly on their tablets. Faces were hard, eyes sharp, movements precise, the kind of discipline born from countless deployments in the shadows of war. Captain Cross adjusted her gloves and checked her rifle again, then looked across at the man seated next to her, Sergeant Malik Reyes, an expert in close quarters combat. "First time on a Black Op flight?" she asked. Malik smirked. "You kidding? I've done worse for breakfast. But something tells me this isn't your average mission." She nodded. "Yeah, Keaton's not known for average." The plane dropped low over a desert valley in eastern Syria. Through the haze, they could see movement below, convoys, armed men, and the faint shimmer of heat from engines. Satellite intel had tracked a weapons shipment for weeks. The men moving it were the ones who'd supplied insurgents in the Afghan mountains, the same chain of violence Emma had fought to disrupt. Keaton's voice came over the comms. "Echo Team, objective is simple. Infiltrate, intercept the shipment, neutralize hostile personnel, and gather intelligence on the financiers. Minimize casualties among civilians. Extraction point Delta in 30 minutes. Emma exhaled slowly. 30 minutes. Not a second more. The transport doors opened, and Task Force Echo dropped into darkness, parachutes carrying them silently into the valley. Emma's heart pounded in rhythm with her training. No fear, only focus. When she landed, dust and sand filled the air. The convoy was visible. 3 trucks, several armed pickups, and dozens of men patrolling the area. They were heavily armed, but unaware of the silent storm descending upon them. Emma signaled to the team. They split into 2 groups, one to intercept the convoy, the other to provide overwatch. She fell with the latter, climbing a ridge overlooking the enemy. Through her scope, she watched every movement, every man, every weapon. It was almost too easy to identify the targets. Almost. Suddenly, a guard on the far side of the convoy paused. Emma's pulse quickened. He lifted a binocular, scanning the horizon, then froze, sensing something. The enemy was more alert than intel had suggested. "Team," she whispered over comms. "They're aware. Engage quietly, now." From the ridge below, Malik and 2 others slipped down, closing in on the convoy with suppressed weapons. Emma fired a single round at a guard's head. He collapsed silently, just as the others reached the trucks. Chaos erupted in slow motion. Bullets zipped through the air. Engines roared. Men shouted. Emma's scope tracked every enemy movement. She fired 3 precise shots, taking out a gunner manning a mounted machine gun. The rest of the convoy tried to flee, but Echo Team moved like shadows, cutting off escape routes with deadly efficiency. Through it all, Emma's mind was clear. She was the eye of the storm, calm, deadly, untouchable. Every shot was deliberate, every breath measured. Then she saw him, a man in a tailored suit, standing next to a crate of weapons, arcing orders into a satellite phone. This was no soldier. This was a financier, the kind who pulled strings from cities thousands of miles away, funding death in distant lands. Emma whispered, "Keaton, I see the target. Civilian with hostile intent. Authorization?" Keaton's voice came crisp over the comms. "Confirmed. Take the target alive, if possible. If he resists, neutralize." Emma adjusted her scope, calculating distance, wind, and elevation. She could disable the man's phone with one shot, preventing a call for reinforcements, or, if necessary, take him out. She exhaled, finger on the trigger. Before she could act, gunfire erupted from the east. A rival faction had arrived, likely tipped off by someone in the network. "Cross, east flank," Malik shouted. Emma fired a rapid sequence, picking off 2 attackers attempting to flank. The others dove for cover. Her heart raced, but her hands were steady. Every shot counted. Every life she saved weighed against the lives she ended. In the center of the convoy, the financier realized he was trapped. His men fell one by one, and the remaining trucks were surrounded. Emma could hear his panicked shouts through the comms, translated in real time by a linguist embedded with the team. "Do not move," Malik yelled, training his rifle on the man. The financier raised his hands, trembling. Emma exhaled, letting her rifle rest. She had the shot, but restraint was just as important as precision. Keaton's voice confirmed. "Secure the target." "Excellent work, Echo Team." Emma climbed down from her overwatch position, moving swiftly to join the others. Dust and blood covered her uniform. The sun burned low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the wrecked convoy. For a moment, the valley was silent again, the calm after the storm. But Emma's mind was not at ease. Her scope had shown her too much. Every convoy guard, every weapon, every life extinguished or saved weighed on her. She could almost see the chain of consequences spiraling outward, the financier's networks, the ripple of violence she'd just interrupted, the families who would never know she had saved them. "Cross," Malik said softly, breaking her thoughts. "You okay?" She blinked, shaking herself. "Yeah, just thinking." Malik nodded. "That's normal. But we can't dwell on it now. Extraction is inbound." The team moved toward the pickup point, guiding the financier, and recovered intel with precision. The desert stretched endlessly around them, but the plane was already circling, waiting to extract Task Force Echo. As Emma climbed aboard the aircraft, she looked down at the valley. Bodies, vehicles, dust, and sand swirled together into a tapestry of war, beautiful and brutal. She let her rifle rest across her lap and closed her eyes. Another mission completed. Another chain of violence disrupted. Another piece of the world slightly less deadly, for now. Inside the plane, Keaton debriefed the team. Target secured, intel recovered, mission complete. Minimal civilian casualties. Congratulations. The team allowed themselves a small cheer, but Emma remained silent, staring out the window. She could still hear the echo of gunfire, still see the faces of those who had fallen. Henderson's words returned to her. "You can't save everyone." But here, she had saved dozens. And she had captured someone who funded hundreds more deaths. It was a victory, but bittersweet. The kind that tasted like dust, blood, and the relentless desert wind. Keaton's voice pulled her back. "Captain Cross, your performance was exemplary. We'll be assigning further operations. There's a network, larger than you know, that we need to dismantle. You'll be central to the effort." Emma exhaled. "Understood, sir. When do we leave?" "Immediately. The war doesn't wait." She gripped her rifle tighter, feeling the familiar weight and responsibility. Ahead lay more danger, more choices, more lives to protect, and if necessary, to take. And for the first time in days, she smiled faintly, a soldier ready to walk through fire again. The desert below disappeared into clouds as the plane climbed. Above, the sun rose fully over the horizon, igniting the sky in gold and crimson. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, letting the heat wash over her. She knew this mission was just the beginning. The transport plane descended into the heart of Aleppo's outskirts. a cityscape scarred by years of war. Crumbling buildings and shattered streets stretched as far as the eye could see. A maze of danger where every alley could hide a gunman or an explosive trap. Captain Emma Cross tightened her gloves, her rifle resting on her lap. Task Force Echo was silent, focused, the kind of calm that comes just before chaos. This was the last mission Keaton had assigned. Take down the mastermind behind the insurgent. Supply chain, a man known only as Al-Rahim. He had funded the convoys Emma had disrupted, the bullets that had flown in Afghanistan, the weapons that had endangered countless lives. This is it, Keaton said over the comms. High-value target. No mistakes. Neutralize or capture. Civilians must remain unharmed. Emma nodded. Understood. The team infiltrated the city under the cover of darkness. They moved silently across rooftops and narrow alleyways, avoiding patrols and checkpoints. Emma's scope scanned constantly, catching glimmers of movement, men carrying radios, guards stationed strategically, eyes darting through the shadows. Malik whispered beside her, "Looks quiet." Too quiet. Emma's eyes never left the street below. Quiet means something's waiting. And she was right. A sudden explosion rocked the street 2 blocks ahead. Dust and rubble sprayed into the air. Civilians screamed. Emma fired instantly, taking out 2 insurgents trying to capitalize on the chaos. Team, tighten formation. She ordered. We move now. The team pressed forward, weapons ready, hearts pounding. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. They had trained for this, but the stakes were higher than any exercise could simulate. Through a shattered window, Emma spotted the target. Al-Rahim was inside a reinforced building, flanked by heavily armed men. He barked orders into a secure phone, likely coordinating reinforcements. Target visual, Emma whispered into the comms. We need a plan. Keaton's voice responded, calm but firm. Echo team splits. Cross, you provide overwatch from the north rooftop. Reyes and Team Bravo breached the main entrance. Emma nodded, moving to her position with silent precision. From the rooftop, she had a perfect vantage point, lines of sight into the building, the surrounding streets, and escape routes. Her scope adjusted. Her breathing slowed. She counted the men, 10 inside, 4 outside, 2 snipers on the adjacent rooftop. Al-Rahim's eyes were on the phone, oblivious to the storm descending on him. Emma exhaled and pressed her finger to the trigger. The first shot silenced a sniper on the roof. A second took out a guard at the corner of the building. Chaos erupted inside. The building shook as Echo Team breached the doors. Flashbangs ignited, sending Al-Rahim's men diving for cover. Malik and the others moved with lethal precision, neutralizing threats, taking hostages safely when possible. Emma adjusted her scope again. She could see the target panic, realizing his fortress was collapsing. Her heartbeat slowed, each shot calculated. Click, her rifle jammed. A moment of panic, then instinct. She grabbed a sidearm, firing with the same deadly accuracy. 2 guards went down. Al-Rahim ducked behind a steel pillar, eyes wide with fear. Keaton's voice came over the comms. Cross, you have 1 shot. Make it count. She took a breath. Her vision tunneled. She saw the target's chest rise, the panic in his eyes, the final opportunity to end the network that had killed and armed countless innocents. She fired. Al-Rahim crumpled to the ground. Silence followed, heavy, almost unreal. Inside, the team secured the building. They recovered hard drives, ledgers, and encrypted devices, proof of the sprawling network that had funneled weapons across borders. Emma scanned the room, noting the stacks of money, the maps detailing supply routes, the charts connecting financiers to combat zones. Malik clapped her on the shoulder. We did it. Emma nodded, but didn't smile. Her eyes lingered on the target. He wasn't just a man. He was the embodiment of countless deaths, faceless until now. And now he was gone. You think it's over? She whispered. Malik shook his head. Never. But for now, we made a difference. Extraction was tense. The streets were crawling with road patrols and civilians trapped in the chaos. Emma provided overwatch, sniper rounds cutting down threats without harming anyone else. She moved like a ghost, invisible and lethal, guiding her team safely to the extraction point. As the helicopter lifted them above the city, Emma looked down at Aleppo. Fires burned in scattered blocks, smoke rising to the sky. The network they had dismantled was shattered, but war was never static. It would rebuild, adapt, continue. Keaton approached her in the helicopter. Cross, exceptional work. This mission will change the way we combat these networks. Emma gave a tight nod. It's not about recognition. It's about stopping the next attack, saving the next life. He studied her silently for a moment, then said, Your record will reflect the success. But I need to ask, after everything, would you do it again? Emma didn't hesitate. Every time. Back at base, debriefing was swift. Maddox, Dalton, and other commanders reviewed intelligence, verified the target neutralization, and confirmed civilian safety. Praise was given quietly. Medals would come later. Emma had no desire for fanfare. She was already thinking about the next operation, the next threat. Henderson found her afterward, leaning against the wall with a rare smile. You're unbelievable, Cross. I don't think anyone could have done what you did. I wasn't alone, she said softly. This team saved lives. I just made sure we could reach them in time. He nodded. Still, you went where most wouldn't, and you did it all with precision. Emma let herself relax slightly. It wasn't often she felt relief. But for once, she allowed herself a small exhale, knowing her choices had saved lives and dismantled a dangerous network. That evening, Emma sat on the edge of her bunk, cleaning her rifle. Each bullet removed, each part wiped down, was a meditation. The weight of the mission still pressed on her. The lives she had taken, the lives she had saved, the moral lines she had walked. She touched the dog tag she wore, a reminder of comrades lost, battles fought, and the cost of survival. Henderson entered quietly. You think it's over? Emma shook her head. Nothing is ever over. Not really. But for now, we did what we came to do. He gave her a look that mixed respect and understanding. Then rest tonight. Tomorrow, the fight continues. She nodded, finally allowing herself a moment of peace. Outside, the desert sky stretched endlessly, stars glittering above like cold witnesses. Emma gazed upward, silently promising to keep walking through fire, to keep protecting lives, and to keep facing the impossible, because that was what soldiers like her did. And as sleep finally claimed her, for the first time in weeks, she felt the faintest trace of hope, that even in a world built on war and shadows, one person's choices could make a difference.